But look,
so now it's me. So now
I'm
it's me
turning it
that's
around
the
on you.
asshole.
Turning it around
asshole.
on you.
Hello and welcome back to the Sunday Bulwark Next Level interview. I am here today with Alex Edelman, a very overwhelmingly successful comedian slash, how does it go? Man of the stage now. He's on Broadway. His show just for us is getting rave reviews from all the people that you care about. But I want to start here, Alex, with this. So I'm pretty confident that of all the humans in the world, I've consumed the most Alex Edelman content of someone who's not actually seen the full show. So I'm coming in blind. I've never seen it. You have a East Coast bias. You're an East Coast elitist that has refused to take the show even 15 miles west of the Atlantic seaboard. It has not not gone anywhere. And as a Californian / Louisianan, that has been challenging for me. But I've read several profiles of you and, consumed multiple podcasts that will be inferior to this. So for our listeners or viewers, in the case of YouTube, hi YouTube people, who like me have not, bestowed upon themselves the gift of coming to see the show, give us the elevator pitch.
Elevator pitch is, first of all, hi guys.
Hi.
Elevator pitch is an Orthodox Jew, I suppose, or a Jew with some thoughts about my interior life and what it means to me, goes to a meeting of white nationalists in Queens. And eventually when I was like, I'm sorry, but this guy's Jewish. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a Jew. And so and then there's an argument that ensues, and that's the show. And so, stuff you see all the time. Pretty standard fare. But yeah, that's been the show. And by the way, and not to be too high-minded about it, it's been useful as a jumping off point for discussions about whiteness and Judaism and identity and assimilation and prejudice and civility and empathy and discourse and how we speak to each other and about each other. That's the thing.
We're going to get into all that. But just as far as my affront to you, are you planning after Broadway? Is this the kind of thing where we get to go on a tour? I don't even know how this this stuff works.
I'll tour it. I was just deciding this week, but yeah, I'll do a little tour and I'll bring it to LA.
It seems like you will get 10 miles from. You will still not be 10 miles from a seaboard, but it will just be the possession.
Yeah, I'll go to Louisiana for you, Tim. Where in Louisiana do you want me to do it?
Thank you. I don't know, New Orleans. You come to the Joy Theater or one of our many great venues that we have here in New Orleans. That's lovely.
If they want to bring me down there, I will make my first ever visit to New Orleans.
You've never been?
I've never been.
Have you been south of the Mason-Dixon line?
Of course, I had to march on Atlanta with the rest of my. I've been to Florida. I've done shows in Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, all the most salubrious, places you'd imagine.
I guess the one problem with touring your show is you're kind of a key element to it. Being that it's about your identity and that you were the one that attended the white nationalist meeting, and so it would be kind of hard to cast someone to do it in your stead.
Richard Kind or Cynthia Erivo are my dream.
Those are the only acceptable options.
This is a little scoop for you. Richard Kind, as of this week, is going to be listed in our program as the understudy, which is so funny to me, given that he's seen the show in DC. He's a lovely man, the loveliest man. But to have him listed is a joke that I am just so pleased about.
What about as I understand it, you're a frequent viewer of political shows. You watch way too much news, as best I can tell. So if you had to choose an understudy from that world, who would you go for? Willie Geist, maybe?
Willie or Donnie would be a good. Heilman would be hilarious, but I don't know if he could do an hour and a half without jamming some nicotine into some Nicorette gum and just him with a pen, just getting all the.
If the show had white nationalist characters in it, if it was not a one-man show, if it was a show that where you cast people from the meeting, Heilman might be a good fit.
Heilman or Nick Fuentes or any, yeah. Okay. Heilman visually would be, but as a personality type, I don't know. But yeah, Geist would be good, and who else would? It's interesting. I've never thought of casting from Chuck Todd. I'd be interested to see Chuck Todd and.
I don't think Chuck Todd would be very good at this. Okay, let's get to the actual substance. So, the show, right? I guess maybe let's just start here first. So, like, why did you go to the white nationalist meeting? Were you mining for material?
No, but I get
Were you
asked this
bored?
question every single day. And I mentioned
Yeah.
in the show that I get asked it every single day, which is a good, and the funny thing is I don't even have a great answer for it other than that, like, and I don't understand why, but it just seemed like something I should do. Like it just seems like something I should do. And I don't know how to, like I've tried to come up with reasons otherwise, but like lots of things to me just feel like things I should do. Like, I'm not going to say all of them now, but like
Maybe one.
maybe one thing that I should do.
Yeah, that's one thing you
There are
should do.
these
It's
faith
also
plays in Branson, Missouri,
okay.
and I feel this really strong pull to like go to them or get cast in one and like be part of this faith play, like about the lives of Jesus. And like, I'm just so curious about, I've been to like a bunch of conferences on like nuclear Iran, like,
okay.
and I went once and spoke at one of these conferences.
Just using your expertise as a Jewish person, or
I picked a name tag off a table, and just like that person wasn't there. They were like, it was sort of like a more intimate salon type discussion, and I was there, and like just I was like, well, this is how I feel. They're like, is that really how everyone feels about it at the University of Maryland? I was like, it is indeed. It is how we feel at the university.
Did you have enough expertise on the subject to be able to
No,
take?
I didn't know. I didn't know what the hell. By the way, the guy that I went with, David, about halfway through our conversation, it's like, oh no, David actually knows what he's talking about. I'm just bullshitting. But yeah. I really feel like Yogi Berra, I can't remember who said that 90% of life is just showing up. But like, I've always just like benefited from showing up. Even my past in comedy has been very unconventional. Like, I started comedy in Scotland. Like, really, I'm not from Scotland. I don't have a connection to Scotland, but it's just like the Edinburgh Fringe Festival was where the most comedy was. So I'm like, I just went there. And like, doesn't everyone have this urge? That's the thing. Doesn't everyone walk down the street and just be like, what's behind this door? What's behind this door? Who lives here? Who works here? Like, it's a question I've been getting asked for 4 years, and I don't really have a good answer other than like, it seemed like something I should do. And people are like, well, did you go for material? And I'm like, I mean, kind of, but also like, I want to live a life where I can talk about everything. Like, where like a road rage incident or like avoiding a road rage incident seems as important and worth talking about as like January 6th or something like that. Like I think that going to different places and meeting different people often gives you a window into yourself and into the world at large that you wouldn't otherwise get. So yeah, I try to go as many places as possible.
I have that poll, but most people don't actually do it, right? Having the poll versus actually doing it. Like we across from my condo in Oakland before I moved to Louisiana was like a Hispanic charismatic evangelical church. It's like on Wednesday nights they would like be in service for hours, and there'd be singing and people speaking in tongues and whatnot. Or I guess I assumed that was happening. I guess maybe that's a false assumption. But it was I talked to some of the people sometimes walking in and out, but I never actually went in because I felt like it was a little bit of I was an intruder, and I didn't want to feel like I was like this was a mocking thing, and I didn't want to feel awkward about, oh, can I leave if I'm getting bored or whatever. And so I never actually did. And my husband always thought I was crazy for even wanting to do that. Like he had no desire to that. So I do think that there are gradients, right? There's a lot of people that want to go try experiences like this that just, what something inside their person, anxiety or whatever, like prevents them from doing so. Like, and it seems like that could have prevented you, right? That you were like, ooh, this seems fun. And then you're like, no, it's going to be too weird.
Maybe this is my most controversial opinion, but I don't buy that anyone doesn't belong anywhere else. Like, I don't believe in, I don't know that I believe in I believe in respecting every space if you can. But like if you go to a meeting of people with one political orientation, you're like, I can't believe they have that political orientation. Well, it's like, well, you went to that, like for you to be outraged that is the thing feels disingenuous. But like, I believe that people should go where they want and observe what they want and participate in like however much they can in the right way. Like, and I think that's at the basis of every great solo show. I think there are four things, which is who you are, who they are, what's happened, what's changed. And like, sorry, Tim, does that make
who's they? I was just looking up in the air. I was like, who you are? I got that. Who they are? What's happened? What's changed? Like that. 3 for 4. I'm following.
They would. Pardon me. I'm allergic to my own BS. But who they are is whoever you've chosen the they to. Like, I mean, you remember the song "Walking in Memphis"?
Sure.
By Mark Cohen.
Yeah.
From the early '90s.
Yeah.
Like Mark Cohen.
I don't know that I need to remember it. It's a live entity. It's a live organism walking in Memphis. You might still hear that any day now.
It's a beautiful solo show.
Yeah.
When you think about it, like they is Memphis, right? But Mark Cohen, the real story of that is like Mark Cohen was looking for inspiration. He read an interview with James Taylor where James Taylor was like, whenever I have writer's block, I go to a place I haven't been before. And Mark Cohen was like, well, shoot, I'll go to Memphis. And so he actually went to Memphis. And like, if you think about it, it's about this like white Jewish guy who goes to like the land of the Delta blues looking for inspiration. And like, if you were just taking it on its face, you'd be like, well, I'm not sure that's like entirely appropriate. But there is something about the way that like Mark Cohen invests his experience. And he actually did, by the way. He went to like Graceland and he went to Al Green's church and he met Al Green. And then he went to the Hollywood and played with this woman. And like the whole song is this really beautiful understanding of who you, Mark Cohen, is, who they, Memphis and Memphis's music is, what happened, which is this set of experiences that really do provide inspiration, and what's changed, which is that Mark Cohen leaves having gotten this incredible experience that's informed this song. And so like, I sometimes struggle with this sort of light assumption that we shouldn't be in, that there are spaces that aren't for everybody. Because I do think that like with the right amount of context and investure and intellectual rigor, that you can put yourself in any space and get something out of it. So like, I really am sorry not to turn this into a conversation about like something that it isn't. But
well, no, I didn't. I mean, no, that's exactly essentially what the show is about, though, right? I mean, like the title of it, right, is there's this there. I think you tell me if I'm interpreting this wrong, but the sense is that the white nationalists that you went to visit, they didn't think that space was for you. The space was just for us, right? And I think that there are people that, and I think in that case, it is, they have dark intentions. But is there not, you going through that experience, you didn't come out of that feeling, well, maybe there's some value in having spaces that are just for us?
I mean, I think that there's. Sorry, one more time, Tim. What do you mean by that? There's value.
I just mean that, like, look. I mean, obviously, this is not to praise. This is not to praise the white nationalists. The old drill. There's the old drill tweet. It's not saying that ISIS was onto something here, but it's just to saying that people find community, right, in this sense of like, oh, here's this space that's just for people like me, whatever the like me is, right? And you were exploring that, being not of them, like both. In your Jewish identity, but also in your, I assume, worldview. And so I just wonder, having lived through that experience, right? Like, clearly you learned from, why it was that they want this. And if you're saying that there are no spaces for anybody, and I just figured you could kind of riff on what your takeaway from that was.
I mean, I think that what you said about the title "Just for Us" is something that people rarely pick up on or don't quite understand or parse. But yeah, that's the point of the title as well. It's not like, because to them they're like, well, this is just for us white people, right? And there are other people who would look at me as a Jew, an Ashkenazi Jew, and be like, well, actually, you do belong in that space. You are a white person, or you're a white passing person. And so like that is the tension that's created there is worthwhile. But I guess the question is, what if I apply the same gloss to other places? Like, I'm sort of looking at other places now, like the Faith Plays in Branson, and also like spend some more time in places that are not white only spaces, but like, suppose I spend some time with like the Nation of Islam, suppose I spent some time with like, the the Black Israelites church in Harlem, like who have some really, some would say, anti-Semitic views. Are they subject to different social, thoughts or different social approaches than the very unanimously disliked white nationalists? Like, what does that look like as well? Like, I think those tensions are interesting to me. Like the thing is, I'm not an explicitly political comedian,
Yeah.
but tensions some comedians are like, oh God, everything, you can't say anything. And I'm like, new tensions mean new frontiers. Like new tensions mean new complexities to explore, depths to plumb. And so I get really excited by the idea that there are new tensions and things that we can't say, or things that we can deal with, or things that I think are hypocritical, or yeah.
So that's interesting. Do you think that there's any do you resonate at all with the contrarian conservative critic who says, "Oh, you can't make these jokes anymore. Roseanne Barr can't, sarcastically talk about, how maybe the Jews should have died, without people appreciating her, comedic gold." And is there any part of as you look at what's next? I mean, I don't know. Is there something about you that looks at like the Black Israelites and says, "Man, it would be hard for me to do this show where that was the case," right? Because maybe, people, maybe that'll be a little bit touchier, being that I'm a white person, that I'm whitish, whatever, however you're describing yourself. Does that concern you? I don't know. How do you think about that?
In terms of that first thing with Roseanne Barr, my favorite thing about Roseanne Barr is that David Sedaris has a story that he's been telling on tour about Roseanne calling him in a hotel room in Paris and just talking at him for 2 hours and then hanging up. And he's like, and he feels like Roseanne's defense should be, whenever she does something that people are upset about, she should be like, "Look, I'm crazy. Ask anyone." Like she really does seem like kind of a lunatic. I think that any subject is fair game. Whenever anyone says you can't say anything, I do think like China has recently decided to crack down on stand-up comedians. And so stand-up comedy theaters are getting fined, and stand-up comedy people are getting actually censored. And so sometimes it annoys me a little bit when people are like, "You can't say anything anymore." And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, in these other countries, they actually can't say anything. Like there are things where they're absolutely being censored. But also on the other hand, there is a bit of truth to the idea that you can't say certain things. Like I remember watching somebody complain about, you can't even make fun of like Tide laundry detergent on national television. Like there are things, advertisers advertising, like there are certain things, making fun of companies and brands is a whole different deal. Like there's a couple of years ago, but like that was the consensus. So, I mean, I don't know I never feel like you can't say anything, but I do think that there are things that you like, context is everything in those sensitive situations. Like I certainly feel like people's standards have changed. I do think sometimes people are punished for behavior that occurs before there's growth or something like that, or society's standards have shifted, and then like, "Oh, that person shouldn't have said that." They're like, "Yeah, no, obviously I wouldn't have made that joke in 2012, but it was 2002. So, yeah, I don't know. Generally, I think it's bullshit, but occasionally I'm like, I guess that resonates with me. I haven't specifically seen what Roseanne said, but I knew that she made a joke about the Holocaust and people were like very upset about it.
It's good comedy. You might want to take some notes. And I know that you're you've been working this same vein for a while now. And after all your Broadway success, you might want to think about other things. And the crux of the joke, see if you can stick with me, I'll set it up for you, is she is saying to Theo Von, there are things you can't say anymore because they are not true. You can only say true things. So that's the crux of the joke. So she starts saying Joe Biden definitely won, right? Joe Biden definitely won. I would never say anything other than that. And then the punchline is like, also, the Holocaust didn't happen. It's kind of like it's backwards day. It's like you remember in
Yes, when you're in grade school.
In grade school, and you're like, it's backwards day. That was the crux of Roseanne's joke. It was backwards day, and on backwards day, the Holocaust did really happen, and Joe Biden didn't get 81 million votes because, she's a lunatic and doesn't think that happened.
It is so weird.
I notice you're not laughing.
Well, not to put too fine a point on it, but rarely do you hear, not to use the medium I'm making fun of, but rarely do you hear subtle irony deployed as a tool for comedy from the far right. Usually like, here, I'm gonna try some subtle irony. Usually that works with my crowd. That's not really the thing that they traffic in. So I approve Roseanne's use of subtle irony as a comedic device, but I just, because it's so rarely seen from conservative comedians, I just don't know that the thing that she's hoping will be appropriate at face value is absolutely it's not that, I will say it's not that funny, but but the stuff
she's not at the top of her game. That's a pretty big podcast, so they're doing well. I think this goes to the point. It's like, if you're being silenced, I've written about this for the Bulwark. I'm like, we're in the golden age of stupid speech. Actually, I'm sensitive to the idea that some people are being silenced, but man, I mean, in 1980, you only had a few shots to become a big shot in the comedy world. There wasn't this plethora of podcasts. I mean, the Theo Von podcast or whatever, I think that's the guy's name. I wasn't a big Real World Road Rules man, but he's from that. And it's like in the top 10 in the country, and like huge audiences are listening to Roseanne Barr spout nonsense about Donald Trump and Jews, and I mean, it seems like they're all doing pretty well. Joe Rogan, they're doing great, selling out stadiums. All these guys seem to be doing pretty good.
It's interesting because I actually know Theo, and I actually really have only ever had like good interactions with Theo.
He seems like he wasn't doing anything. He's just standing. He's just sitting there. And I was like, somebody needs to coach this guy. Someone who's been on cable news with crazy people. You have to cultivate this face. Like when they say something that's like, so if the clip goes viral and you're there, you're on there going kind of, no, sorry. If you're listening to this on podcast, you have to imagine my no face. But Theo didn't do that. He was kind of like, I think maybe because he wasn't following the subtleties of the joke though.
There's a quote that I love that I've started remembering recently, which is the best are full of doubt while the worst are full of passionate intensity. It's William Butler Yeats.
Yates, yeah.
Yeats. I can't remember.
Is it Yeats or Yates?
Yeats or Yates.
Yeats is like
Yeats. But William Butler Yeats, as my Australian
friends would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is, and I think about that a lot in the sense that like, a lot of comedians I know, and actually, especially me, sometimes like, I'll hear a crazy person, I'll be like, wait, is that right? Because it doesn't seem right, but I'm willing to consider almost anything. And when I say almost, I really mean like, almost, like I'm not, like, I am pretty sure that the Holocaust did happen, given that most of my family was wiped out. And that I've been to all of those camps and cried very hard at Yad Vashem and think about it deeply on the days that I designate thinking about it. And it is so hard for me to like, I just read Deborah Lipstadt's book about her trial with David Irving. Deborah Lipstadt is the U.S. ambassador, the special envoy to combat anti-Semitism. And she was sued by a Holocaust denier named David Irving for calling him a Holocaust.
Okay.
And like, it is really interesting because she had to defend the Holocaust happening in British libel court, which is a really horrifying. By the way, there's a very decent movie called Denial about this, but the book is as good. And it's fascinating because it is so hard to hate people. For me, it's hard to hate people in a face-to-face way. It's hard to hate people on a one-on-one level. So like, if someone said to me, and by the way, people have said to me, the Holocaust did, where like the Holocaust is. So in Wales after a show, someone was like, just so you know, Holocaust, it's exaggerated. Only like a couple of thousand Jews died. And I was like, well, so weird to see someone with a liver and a set of kidneys and two eyes and a mouth saying this to me, because I'm receiving it as an opinion. But it's so crazy that I have to, like, does any of this make sense, Tim? Like, it's hard for me. It's hard. If you are a person for whom a big part of your life is parsing human behavior, and you receive very inhuman behavior or behavior that is so extremely non-standard, it is very dysregulating. So yeah, I don't know. That's not me defending Theo or me defending anyone who has to go on TV with like Glenn Beck or something like that. But like I do think about this sometimes. Like if you're sat on Bill Maher or any of these places where people who are crazy and people who aren't crazy intersect, and you're like,
yeah,
how would how would you actually receive it? It would be an out-of-body experience.
Well, I'm just giving you a tip, and there are a lot of areas of expertise you have over me these days. But here's one of if you have to do Bill Maher and share a place, which seems like you're on that trajectory with crazy people, I just you cultivate I'm not sure about that face. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, it's just kind of like
It's how I feel most of the time.
That seems wrong. And then you're cool. Then you're cool. Then people still might get mad. Like they still might be like, Alex, you should have refuted them right there on live TV. But that's harder than it seems. So at minimum, you got to do the I'm not sure about that face.
Kim, you watched that episode where Heilman was on with Russell Brand, right? And
I did.
I thought did a very good job with Russell Brand, who was doing all of this sort of like Neil Strauss, the game persuasion tricks or something, where he's like touching John and being like, John, darling, what you have to actually understand. And John Heilman is just there like, I thought he kept his cool beautifully. And it was like, and I thought, God, I've never had a knock on wood with that type of thing, but
he did. Howard had an I'm not sure face on the whole time. He was doing good with that, but it was hard for him because this was, he's I don't know if I'm betraying some confidences here with John Heilman, but he's a huge fan of Take Me to the Greek. When we were on the circus, it's a Russell Brand movie that's pretty good. And when we were on the circus together, he loves this movie so much that he made me watch it. We drove across Florida or Arizona, some state, I forget. And he made me watch it with him in the car and laughed and laughed. And so I think it was disappointing. It was on two levels. He was like, I'm dealing with a crazy person and I'm dealing with a crazy person whose art I admire and love. And so I don't want to be too hostile, but I don't want to be. Anyway, I thought Howling did a B+ job. I give him a strong B+. What
would bring him to an A?
There were a few points where I wanted more forcefulness. He went at Russell a couple times where I was like, he had the better of the points, and then a couple times, and I get it. Look, I've been in these situations, and I'm grading on a very high curve because I want to do an A for myself, and I've given myself worse than B+ before, and you're watching it, and it's the Costanza, like the jerk store thing. You feel like I had the line, I had the comeback. And there were a few times where I'm sitting there watching it, be like, Heilman, you have him on this thing's fucking stupid. He's talking about how the corporate media is behind this and that. And it's like, you're on Fox. He's making he was talking about how the corporate media was lying about the vaccines and blah, blah, blah. And Brand was making just such ludicrous points. And I just think that the domineering nature of his personality made it hard to find times. Hellman had to pick his spots on rebutting it. That's all. That's the B+.
I have such, again, I have an unrealistic view of how people think. Like part of me thinks, well, surely 99% of people watching that go, well, this guy's an idiot. Or, well, this guy's not an idiot, but this guy is, like, I actually think Russell Brand is very smart. I've worked with Russell Brand on like a UK Comedy Central show. And I think Russell's very smart, but skewed in the wrong. Like he has brain power, but he lacks some essential. I don't know how to put this. Like my first big issue with him is that when he was like, "Don't vote," I asked him. Actually, when I was there, I was like, "Why are you telling people not to vote? There's no such thing as not voting." Like David Foster Wallace covered this in his piece on the John McCain. In 12 Monkeys. David Foster Wallace is like, there's no such thing as not voting. You either vote or you tacitly double the value of some entrenched diehards vote.
Right.
And I'm like, there's no such thing as not voting. Like, don't fool yourself into thinking that like you're making a brave choice by not voting. It's very much in the interests of like the people that you hate to keep you at home doing one hitters and like not talking, and never getting to the booth and voting day. And so like I had this chat with him, and he gave me a really smart response that actually didn't mean anything. Like he gave me a really smart response that actually had no substance to the thing. So I was like, wow, this guy is like actually an expert at BS. Like this guy's actually a really, there is something really, really intelligent about his utter lack of substance. And so like, I don't know. I find that, but I trust that most people will see that and be like, well, this is a smart guy who just doesn't quite know what he's talking about.
Let me tell you, most people will not see that. As someone who has to suffer through all of the different media ecosystems, not just the select ones that approve my priors, that Bill Maher episode we've now been talking about for 10 minutes, so the poor listeners who haven't watched it, I don't know, maybe pause this and Google it. But you get it, essentially it's Russell Crowe, or not Russell Crowe. Poor Russell Crowe. What did he do? Russell Brand, talking about COVID nonsense and Heilman and election fraud nonsense, and Heilman doing his best to object while Bill Maher played neutral arbiter. Maybe the vaccines don't work. Who knows? Anyway,
Sebastian, feel free to cut this up. Feel free to absolutely slice and dice me.
I watched the videos afterwards on TikTok and stuff, and it's just like, Brand owns corporate media shill John Heilman as one side, and then other people are like, Heilman dominates Russell. Crazy, look at crazy ass Russell Brand has lost his mind. So it just depends on what ecosystem you're in, regardless. Before what the response was. I'm curious though. So without giving away too much of the show or any necessarily.
You do whatever you want.
What I'm curious. So you did go into the Lion's Den, and we've been talking about this and this desire when you're with other humans to kind of want to give the benefit of the doubt at some level. And I'm curious, did the white nationalists suck you in on anything? Were there anything where you're like, man, they might have a point on this, or I hope that I can. I hope that maybe they'll want to be my friend, or I don't know. Did you have any human, kind of connection there that you didn't expect?
There were a few things, and actually, I'm going to say something that just didn't make it into the show because I don't have time in the show. The show's very tight,
obviously.
Oh yeah, of course. The show's got to be really
tight 5.
Or tight.
It's tight 1 hour 28.
Tight 80 or whatever it is. But there were a few things where I was like, oh, you're so close. You're so close. Someone's like, billionaires control our elections. And I was like, yes, I like some meaningful campaign finance reform in the United States. Like, I don't think that's entirely off base. Like, dude, billionaires and global corporations, Citizens United is a real problem. We should probably address it. But they're like, Soros and I thought it was going to be a more salon-like exchange of ideas. And then I realized there were arguments, but they were intra arguments instead of inter arguments about like the best way to do things. They're very upset about statues coming down, and then one person was like, I don't think it's that important. I think it's like the media trying to distract us. And I was like, that's a very interesting center left opinion, actually. Like that's that wouldn't be completely. It's like whenever everyone
maybe not
about,
center left. What did he think was important? It's like the statues aren't important because it's distracting us from the goal of creating a white ethno-state.
Absolutely. Well, one of them was like, this is a thing that they're like, it's a symptom instead of the disease. And I was like, that's interesting. Like they were like, it's part of the erasure of white men, the replacement of white men. It's not okay. Like, I think that one of the things that I talk about this in the show, I do have a moment of empathy for them where I realize that a lot of this has to do with their sort of lack of community and how important, like there were moments where there were a few people in this room, and I don't say this in the show, I could see a few people in this room wanting to sort of not agree with any point, but not sort of like pitch against the grain. Like there are a few people who are like, I don't know that I agree with that, but I don't really want, like, this is my community, and so much depends on my community here. Like so much depends on me having the, and by the way, I'm very quick to say in interviews and, that like the show details have been changed to protect me and other people. And whenever anyone's like, did this happen? I'm like, yes. Or like, did this happen? I'm like, no. Like I'm very, very clear that the show is comedy. Now it's like stand-upified. It's like 70%, 80% true now.
Yeah.
And different characters are combined. And I had a director who was really brilliant about like I used to be like, well, that's true. And he's like, well, it's not funny, so it's gone. Like that's it was like, it has to be entertaining.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was surprised by, my dad used to say this thing about that, used to quote this Einstein quote that God in his infinite wisdom created three things: Nazism, integrity, and intelligence. And he said, but he made it so that you couldn't possess all three at once. So you couldn't be a Nazi with integrity and be smart, or you couldn't be a Nazi who was smart and have integrity. You couldn't have both, like you couldn't have both of those things and be it.
Right.
And so, not to apply this to people who, although actually, who I'm sure love to share some of those things with people in Germany in the 30s, but like there was failures oftentimes in this room in their willingness to see other people. That was the one thing that like really struck me about, like, I was like, well, I feel like I'm doing all this work seeing you. Like, don't you see other people? Don't you see other people who feel powerless and voiceless and want to, that was the one thing I was sort of like itching to get at with them. And it just never, if there's a failure for me in this room, I was never able to quite be like, well, don't you see other people struggling out there more than you?
Just as an observation, I mean, was this, I guess, was this inspired at all by your avid reading of the, New York Times adventure tourism into conservative diner world? Because there is an element of this that's like that, right? Where it's like, where what you're trying to do like has a depth to it that what they didn't do. And I'm just wondering if, like, because they were trying to get at those same questions, right? Like trying to understand, is this economic anxiety, or, is this, what is happening here?
I tried very hard I will say that the show was inspired by that in the sense that I read those pieces and went, this can't be that. This absolutely can't be blue guy parachutes into red thing.
Yeah.
It has to be, the show isn't even about the meeting, really. The show is the meeting is a jumping off point into exploring the gradations of whiteness for Jews, essentially, or what we assimilate in order to, because I read those pieces and didn't think they were particularly inspired. One of the reasons in the interest of disclosure for those listening, like I've been following Tim for a long time. I've read Tim's writing. I think don't make that face. Don't make
this embarrassing.
This is the embarrassing.
No,
this is the face
me.
that he was describing, and the I don't know about this face. But like, I think it's really hard to write about diner worlds in a unique way. And I think it's really because people try to make it writ large instead of a personal story. Like, like my show, if it is anything, it's a personal story. It's one guy's, which is why I'm always hastening to mention that details have been changed, because I don't want my show to be a think piece. My show is a personal story about myself and the things that I would like to see. And there are failures in that, which I try to reckon with. There are delusions in that, which I try to reckon with. Like, I don't like those diner stories, but I understand the impulse behind them, because the best are full of doubt while the worst are full of passion and intensity. And so obviously the people with doubt are going to go to the people with passion and intensity and be like, okay, what is behind this passion and intensity? Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Right.
And so, like, I think that is, like, if it shares a DNA at all, did any of that make sense, Tim?
No, it does, because the missing piece is that and this is just the nature of writing for the New York Times, so it wasn't even the writers of these articles' fault. Is that, like, there is no them in the story, right? Like these stories there's no me. Sorry, there's a them. There's no me. There is no Alex in those stories, because it's like, I have to write about what I'm seeing, but it's not like, hello, I am a, liberal dwelling New Yorker, who has, one uncle that lives in Iowa, and I'm like trying to understand why that person voted for Trump. And so I'm traveling to meet people like him and talk about them and look at what my own blind spots were. Right? Like there's none of that in those stories. It was complete. It was like a zoo, it was like, I'm going to a zoo and I'm writing about what the people and the animals behind the cages are. right? And that is very different than I think than what you're trying to do. And I think that's what left a lot of people cold with those stories.
What's interesting is like what is interesting to me, Tim, are the unexpected gradations. And by the way, that's where comedy comes from, right? Comedy comes from surprise. Like, all of Mel Brooks' stuff is so heavily on surprise, relies so heavily on surprise. And like, there is inherent comedy in the surprise. Like, in the midterms, I went to Pennsylvania to knock on doors with some friends. And you get these Democrat voter rolls. And we're walking around, and I'm with this young woman, really incredible young woman who's part of the 4 people walking around. And, an activist, a college student, person of color. And we're walking by this house, and it's on our list, and it's got one of those like blue line flags outside where it's like the American flag, but there's a blue line indicate like support for the police. And she's like, this is the wrong house. And I was like, this is the right house. This is Pennsylvania. Like, this is a middle of Pennsylvania. Like,
right.
This is a neighborhood filled with cops and firefighters. We're knocking on this door. And like, there is like, that's a very serious thing, but there's also like real comedy there. Like, there is surprise, right? Like,
the Tom Hanks bit. It's like the best SNL bit in a while, like the Tom Hanks Black Jeopardy bit, It's like that, right?
I love that sketch so much.
Yeah.
Where, like in the button at the end of, there's a time, if you don't know what Tim's talking about, there's a great sketch. There's a recurring sketch called Black Jeopardy. And there's one and it's beautiful. And there's one sketch in that series that beautifully subverts. They've got a MAGA Republican wearing the red hat. He's there, and with all these with all these like Black contestants, and he is absolutely they're all in sync on one thing. And then they get to Final Jeopardy, and he's like, after the break, Final Jeopardy, lives that matter. And they're like, well, one long lasting. It's a really beautiful thing that highlights that sometimes and the jokes, a lot of the jokes are about like mutual suspicion and close-knit communities, and like the tension between communities and the individual that are slightly outside like the mainstream. Like, it's a really interesting, beautifully wrought comedy sketch that I've seen probably like 10 or 11 times, because like, I love those tensions and surprises that are like, I don't know, that come up out of unusual places. Maybe that's what makes me want to go to these things.
Okay, one more on this. Then I just want to just really quick cut a couple of other things and let you go. Since you admitted to reading me, which I'm grateful for, one of the things I tried to do in the book, which you don't have to admit to have not read, is just like, I was trying to understand the rationalizations for why people went along with Trump, people who knew better, and there wasn't like a clean-cut answer for why some people did never Trump and some people stuck around with him, et cetera. But like, one of the things I tried to explore with myself was, I think, besides just Trump's buffoonish racist idiocy that prevented me from getting on board, another thing that I think gave me an ability to kind of see things a little differently was that I'd already come out of the closet, and like, I've had an identity-changing event, that I had explored. And I'm curious, like, you growing up in an Orthodox world, like, and being, whatever I'm just curious if like you feel like that, like, otherness from within, that Orthodox Jewish, Ashkenazi Jewish community, like, helped you kind of have a little bit of, separation, to be able to kind of explore all these things, in a way that maybe other folks wouldn't have.
Well, first, I did read the book and like the book and send you a message when I finished the book. So, you don't have to admit to not having read the message. But look,
so now it's me.
I'm turning it around on you. I'm turning it around on you. But yeah, I think that helped me. Look, growing from an insular community to a less insular community, like going from Orthodox Judaism or even modern Orthodox Judaism to through the slightly permeable membrane of a more, modern, a modern set. One, it gave me a sort of first I was raised with a Talmudic approach, which meant that two sides of an argument were both treated with dignity, or three sides of an argument, or five sides of an argument. Like, not to quote the newsroom, but some argument, I know some arguments have one side, some have two, some have five, or something like that. Like, I was raised with a Talmudic background, so I understood that, and also I was raised in a weirdly very diverse set. Like there were Jews of color, there were Jews who were heavily Republican, there was a Jew whose brother was the ambassador to Spain. Like they were all in our community, ambassador to Spain under Obama. And like they didn't all agree with each other, but they I'm not like, and they all coexisted because they didn't. Like there were big arguments and big splits. But what I did realize is that some people, and I really felt I experienced this like reading your book, some people are the most of a thing first. And it is hard when you are the most of a thing first. Like if you are the most of a Jew first, and that is your primary identifier, and that's how you feel. Like I have friends from growing up who voted for Trump because like Israel to them is the most important thing in the world. And I can't imagine anyone, like they'd forgive anyone if they were, if they were perceived as more pro-Israel. And I had friends who couldn't countenance a vote for anyone who would threaten abortion because they view abortion as a very sacred Jewish value, or like the right to choose is a very sacred Jewish value. And other people who think it is all, everything was open to interpretation. So I think that insular community really informed my approach to comedy, my approach to discourse, my approach to how I understand people. So I just realized it's not very funny things. Hey, but,
no, that's okay. I'm trying to get you serious. Okay, my final comment about the show is, how do you, did I come up with this, or has anybody else said that you're sort of like the inverse JD Vance? So there may be a Senate run in your future. This is what I'm telling you. The JD Vance book.
I haven't read a Hillbilly Elegy.
Okay, well, you don't have to have read it. I didn't. Do you think I read fucking Hillbilly Elegy? I sniffed that asshole out as a phony from day one. The first interview I saw of his, I was like, this guy's full of shit. And I was like, I don't buy this. But it landed with people because people are so obsessed, in this thing. And it wasn't really intentional, I don't think. I know it wasn't intentional, actually. His gay roommate linked his text. It's like a state senator in Georgia leaked some of his texts where he was like, he's like, oh man, this is Trump winning is going to be bad for the country, but good for the book. And he didn't expect it, right? And I don't think that you were intentional, right? But it's like this stew that we're in is a lot of people trying to be like, man, there's this crazy identity shit happening out there, and how do we translate that? And so in a lot of ways, you're the inverse JD Vance. I guess that's it. There's no question. That's more of a comment than a question.
I'll just say that people are desperate. I think right now, like the success of the show that I'm doing, I think speaks to people's desperation for someone who will look at a shade of gray without like being like, so maybe they're right. But like, I think people are really eager for us to have a chat about the discursive time that we're in, and like the identities that we're obsessed with, and like but also people who come to the show. Like the best part of doing the show off Broadway was there's a restaurant called the Commerce Inn across from my first theater, and I'd go in to eat there all the time, and the lighting's really bad, and so I could sit there and just sit and listen to people argue about the show. It was so gratifying. I'd go in like twice a week and just sit there.
This is so much better than searching Twitter mentions for why we did it to see what people were saying about it, which I may or may not have done once or twice, and it fills me with shame. That is so great.
You want it to spur a conversation and arguments, and also after every show, this is worse than both of those things. After every single show, with like maybe 5 exceptions over the course of this run, I go outside and I answer any question anyone has. And I still haven't come up with a good reason, like why I was like, I just
no, that is fan service. That is good, and that is cool. That is so cool that you do that. Though it's like right on the edge between cool and humble and super narcissism. It's like the inverse horseshoe, because Donald Trump once, this is my favorite anecdote from Maggie Haberman's book about Trump, is before Trump got famous, famous when he was just tabloid famous, he would go stand outside the Trump Tower on the street corner just hoping people would recognize him. He wanted that feeling of like, did these people know Trump yet? And so like there's like a hint of that, like a tiny hint of that inside something very magnanimous and humble.
Actually, the reason I did it early on was for material, because people would ask questions, and if people asked questions that I thought should be answered by the show, I'd go, oh, I have to make that clearer.
That's legit.
I have to make that clearer for people so that even the dumbest idiot in the world would walk out not thinking a certain thing. But like, I mean, I still get some of the same questions, so I haven't done the job. But like, you know, my friend PJ,
some people just aren't going to get it.
That's exactly what my friend PJ says. He's like, listen, bigger audience means more stupid people also. So it's not always clear, but it is a very like, you're right. There's also something narcissistic. Be like, you guys spoke to me let me listen to me speak for 80 minutes. Would you like 20 more? You know, like it's a very.
Okay, I want to stroke your ego one more time, then we're getting to rapid fire. So the coolest part of this for you has to be, I mean, Seinfeld is there, goes to see you. All these people go to see you. SJP, you know, Carrie Bradshaw was like, I think an Instagram post of hers or a tweet set you off. And I mean, you know, these are all, well, I'm older than you, but still, these are all kind of, you know, millennial. What are you, young millennial or elder Gen Z?
I'm millennial. I'm a young millennial.
Yeah. So these are all of, you know, our flashpoints, and they're all like coming to see you, complimenting it. It's like, what has that like felt like? What's been the coolest part of that?
Steve Martin and Seinfeld's, Colbert, all the guys that I sort of worship. You know, Adam Duritz came last week. That was cool, from Counting Crows. And man. You know, like different.
How do you focus on stage when Seinfeld's out there? Like I had to do a book reading with my mom's best friend, who I know is a Trumper, and I did a horrible job at the read. I was like, this was not my A game, because I could just keep seeing her out of the corner of my eye, and that's my mom's friend. Okay, now replace her with Seinfeld. How do you do it?
I always think, how did anyone shoot Lincoln? Because I'm like, during the
like
show,
the movie
the audience
Lincoln, or literally shoot
Abraham Lincoln, because I'm always like, the whole audience is watching Abe Lincoln.
They're not watching the show.
They're not watching the show. Like, wasn't when John Wilkes Booth entered the box, wasn't everyone like, well, wait, what the fuck's that guy doing with the gun? Like
where was the good guy with the gun in that theater?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely not in the box of Lincoln, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy when those guys come, and also it's really gratifying. Like, I'm a huge comedy fan, so for your heroes and your betters, and Mike Birbiglia produced it, someone I deeply respect and admire and have grown to have a really great friendship with, is to have that. That's the, you know, the cool. It's like one of the heads of my comedy Mount Rushmore put up my show, and then all the other heads came to see it. So like, that's really crazy. But Steve Martin giving me a joke for the show really was amazing, and Seinfeld gave a great note, and Colbert gave a great note, and Billy Crystal gave a huge note, which was to stop using a handheld mic and start using a headset mic. That really opened the show up. Like, it's a beautiful thing to be able to have something that people can come on and give feedback on and help you work on. Like, that's really cool.
I don't know you really, except for the email you sent congratulating me on my book that I totally read, but I'm still kind of proud of you, which is that weird? Can we be proud of one another without actually knowing you? It's a strange feeling. That's so cool.
I'm so thrilled to hear that, because I really love your stuff, and I'm so pleased to be on this, and I hope that the people listening, if I've said anything really stupid, will allow me some grace.
The people listening will forgive you, but the people listening will not forgive you. We don't do rapid fire. We are over our time that I've promised you, so we're doing it really fast. It's a rapid fire. Are you ready? You said your comedy Mount Rushmore. Don't care, because this is a Jewish-themed rapid fire, and I tried to get Bill Crystal to come on and do it, but he was otherwise indisposed, so I had him help me submit the questions. Number one, your Jewish-themed Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore of Jews.
Mount Rushmore of Jews. Mel Brooks. The chief rabbi of the UK, Lord Jonathan Sacks. I know, very obscure.
You know, it's good. You got to be obscure hipster Mount Rushmore.
What if I was like Henry Kissinger? No, Joseph Lieberman. No, I think, God, this is such a hard. The writer Nathan Englander, and
Jesus.
God, I know. God. Oh, and
Jesus probably should be on the Jewish Mount Rushmore. Maybe that's
should Jesus? I think Houdini was a better magician, so I think Houdini has to go. Houdini should go up there.
I would have put Sandy Koufax on there. Okay, that's pretty good Mount Rushmore. We'll say Houdini.
Koufax is great. Yeah.
You know, Jews had to know that they could do sport. Okay, your tastiest shellfish. Oh wait, sorry, you can't eat shellfish. That's too bad. You're really missing out. Okay, your favorite Jewish holiday.
I love Passover. Love Passover,
the most meaningful amends the most meaningful amends you've ever given or received on Yom Kippur?
I stole money once from my grandfather to buy baseball cards, and it killed me for a year. And then I came clean to my papa. He was like, that was a really big.
That is so good. That is so much better than the Catholic
$20.
tradition where we just confess to the priest and then the priest tells us to do Hail Marys. That's so much less satisfying than having to go up to the human that you made amends to. And anyway, okay, final one. We did all these greats, coming to see you. Pay it forward. Give us a comedy show or something, somebody's set, somebody's something that you think that our listeners should go see besides just for us.
There's a guy. There's a woman downtown named Liz Kingsman who's doing a show called One Woman Show, which is very good indeed. It's running through the beginning of August at the Greenwich House Theatre, formerly known as Barrow Street Theatre, and that's absolutely excellent. And there's a comedian on tour named Danny Jollis, who I really love, who I think is worth your time.
We will match them. Alex, we're 6 minutes over. It's been a good show, a long show. I'm so grateful.
You'll cut it down.
We'll cut it down. No, I'm apologizing to you. You're on Broadway now. Broadway. You've got demands on your time. You're huge. I mean, you've got so much demands on your time. You're spending 20 minutes after the show talking to your fans. You are a great Jewish American. I'm grateful. We will talk to you soon, I hope. I hope to come see you in New York if you don't take the show away from the Atlantic seaboard. I promise you, I will come do it in person.
Please.
And not be limited just to the many YouTube clips of you I've consumed.
Thank you very much. I'm so pleased.